So I took my glasses off for this video, and I've been reading stuff since early this morning, and my eyes are pretty much shot, as they usually are by this point in the day. But I find that I do my best work on these late at night, and actually a lot of Twilight Zone episodes, I would say like maybe 25% at least, maybe 30% or so. They're really most effective when watched at night. And some of the ones I've commented on here recently, Dead Man's Shoes is definitely at the top of that list, and Printer's Devil, and any number of other episodes. They're really most effective when watched at night versus during the day. People might disagree with me on that, but they're the ones that have mostly nighttime scenes. Also thinking of like A Nice Place to Visit from season 1, and The Invaders from season 2, and even Jezebel from season 4. It starts off with a square dance in the barn in the evening. Anyhow, they're just better off when watched at night. I think they're more effective. And of course, Twilight Zone, when it was originally broadcast, was broadcast in the evening. It was a nighttime show. So anyhow, I did want to make one little addendum, and there's the old adage, leave the squid out of the goldfish bowl. But sometimes, when we write something or when we give a speech or something of that ilk, something gets left off that we wanted to talk about. It's like, oh darn, I didn't mention that. And what I mean by keeping the squid out of the goldfish bowl is don't try to cram too much into it, or else you start losing your credibility. But I did want to make one small addendum to what I said about the little people, and that was at the end of it, there are the two biggest astronauts played by the actors Robert Eaton and Michael Ford. My very good friend Gloria Paul was in fact married to Robert Eaton, and one day I came over to pick her up at her house with her son Jefferson, and she said, Andrew, come in, my ex-husband's Twilight Zone is on right now. And I said, your ex-husband was on Twilight Zone? She goes, that's him right there on the right, Bob Eaton. I said, when were you married to him? And she said, 1957. I was only married to him for a year. And then we divorced. And I said, really? Wow. And she said, yep. Then he went off and married Lana Turner. So I just wanted to add that. And people remember that scene. I think that's probably the most memorable scene of that episode. There was Craig, played by Joe Moross, who's down in this canyon saying, I'm the god! Crying, caterwauling. And then they see him, it's like, when they pick him up, it's like, why, let's go, let's not waste our time on this joker. And he perishes in a hail of rocks, and then they pull down the statue that they built to him, the shrine that they built to him, and that was it. So on this video, I'm going to talk about another third season episode, actually two of them. I'm kind of stuck on season 3 right now, I guess. I talked about one more pallbearer and Dead Man's Shoes, and one or two other ones before this, and now I'll continue with some more from that season, which was really a very sort of pivotal season in terms of Twilight Zone, because it was, then transitioned to an hour, and by this point Serling had written himself silly, and I think the quality was just kind of starting to decline a little bit because he really was worn out, or starting to get worn out, and then he left at the end of the season, although he continued writing his share of the show for the next 2 seasons, or season and a half. Season 4 was only 18 episodes, and then the final season was a whopping 36, I believe. So, Theodore Bikel starred in the episode 4 o'clock, which also featured a bird, and I believe his name on the episode was Pete, but I did hear someplace that this parrot was the family pet of the Serling family. I'm not sure if that's true or not. It's unconfirmed. But the legendary Theo Bikel, or Theodore Bikel, whichever you prefer, starred in it along with Linden, Chiles, and Angela Lansbury's mother. The great Angela Lansbury's mother appeared in that. And then, of course, who else? We could go down the list of Twilight Zone actors and these famous parents of famous children. Sally Field's mother was in an episode in the 4th season. That was the new exhibit. And Angela Lenz, Mary's mother, was in 4 o'clock. So 4 o'clock is the story of a guy who basically not makes a living, but spends his days. I don't know how he makes a living necessarily, but he spends his days serving as this sort of tattletale guy who's got a card catalog. God, when was the last time you saw a card catalog? He's got like a card catalog of all these people's misdemeanors that he's read about in the paper and made into index cards, and he just makes calls or reports all day long, to various hospitals about bad doctors and so on and so forth. And believe it or not, there are plenty of these whistleblowers out there who do just this sort of thing. And I'm not talking about whistleblowers who blow the whistle on Enron or WorldCom or something like that. But there are people out there who just constantly rat on other people and try to dig up dirt on other people. And they're in workplaces and they're just ordinary citizens. It's like they're not out to improve anything. They're just out to tattle and get the credit for doing that, snitching. So here's this guy, and Serling made him up just to be, not the makeup department, but Serling made this guy up just to be hilarious in his own right. He's got on these Coke bottle glasses, and he's got this bird, and he just spends all his time doing this reporting, and never with any intention of making the world a better place, or maybe in some warped way that's his objective, but he just makes a business out of doing this. So anyway, Linden Chiles, who plays this kind of FBI sort of agent, comes in about halfway through it, and I met Linden a few times. He was a very nice man with a very long career, and I remember him telling me, this was like 2003 when I first met him, he said, "No, I'm not acting anymore." He said, I've had enough of it. And he said, "I did an episode of Frasier last year." And he said, "I had such a rotten time on it." And, not that he didn't like the actors on there. He said, the actors were nice enough. Kelsey Grammer and all the rest of them, they were nice people. But he just said, I said to myself after I finished shooting that episode, he said, "I don't want to do this anymore. I don't have to do it. And I'm not going to do it again." And he officially retired, but he had a great career for himself as a terrific actor. And one of the films that he did was one of my favorite childhood films, Cloak and Dagger, with Henry Thomas. Everybody knows Henry Thomas for E.T., and isn't he also in Legends of the Fall? That film was tremendous. And who else was in it? Jeanette Nolan and John McIntyre, who were an integral part of Twilight Zone, too. And Linden mentioned, he had a scene with them, and he said that they were both terrific people and terrific actors who were really respected in the industry. So back to 4 o'clock. Somebody else who appears in it is a gal named Phyllis Love, who plays this wife of a young doctor who Krangle, played by Bikel, rats out. And I never met her, but she was in this group of actors who came from Northwestern University. And she was a very good actor who was in a lot of shows of that day. And Lamont Johnson directed 4 o'clock, and ultimately the punchline of the whole thing is that Krangle is going to turn everybody into tiny little gnomes, but guess what? He's the one who ends up a tiny little gnome, and it scares the hell out of this parrot to see his master, who's now suddenly just about six inches tall. So not a whole lot to distinguish it, but it's entertaining nonetheless. And also wanted to make commentary in this video on Two, starring Elizabeth Montgomery and Charles Bronson, both Hollywood legends who did a Twilight Zone together. How many really like A-list actors? I can call Elizabeth Montgomery an A-list actor. I think she deserved that billing. But how many times did you see them in a Twilight Zone episode together? Not very many. So needless to say, they did this tour de force thing with so little dialogue, written by Montgomery Pittman. And Montgomery Pittman doesn't get mentioned a whole lot when we're talking about Twilight Zone. Of course, he directed a couple, I believe he directed all of the episodes that he wrote, but he also directed a couple of others that he didn't write. He was an enormously, enormously talented man. And it's a shame that he had a very short lifetime. He had a very short life due to cancer. But we can definitely call, and he died before the series was even over, but we can definitely call him a major player and a major contributor to the series. So, of course, 2 is this, story in the aftermath of some war at some point in time. And these 2 people find each other and fall in love. Simple, but the construction of this whole thing about how they come together and how they there's all this nonverbal communication between them, and she's Russian and he's not, and somehow they come to, even though they don't speak the same language, she knows no English and he knows no Russian, they come together over the course of 23 or 24 minutes. And in the meantime, there's a lot of static between them, and it looks like they pretty much did their own stunts for it. And the sets were very, very well designed, and you see them like eating all this food, and you see this, talking about birds, pet birds, you see this bird cage with dead birds in it at one point. And it was really just quite a masterpiece. Quite a masterpiece indeed. And that was definitely a good episode to open season 3 with a really moving such tale. And I always like talking about Montgomery Pittman's scripts and the ones that he directed. He also directed Dead Man's Shoes, which I've talked about already. And I don't think I really talked about him at all when I did that commentary, but he was a very skilled director as well. He knew how to write and direct. That's not a combination that you see too often, where somebody is equally good at both things. I think a lot of people nowadays, they like to do everything. They like to write, direct, produce, all this stuff. They want to, it's like their film, their movie, first billing. But it's like, are they good at all of those things? No, probably not. So, anyhow, I will come back soon with some more season 4 commentaries. I don't even do these videos like every week. It ends up being more like every 2 or 3 weeks because I'm really so busy. But I'll get through, since I'm kind of stuck on season 3 now, I'll do some more season 3 commentaries very soon, hopefully. Thank you.